Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Speaker Circle. This evening, I am so fortunate to be joined by media and marketing specialist. Social media is her specialty, Miss Olivia Hendricks.
Hello.
Hey, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being a guest here on Speaker Circle. I have to give full disclosure. Olivia is part of the phenomenal branding team that works on all of my branding, and they designed my book cover and did all these great things, and they're so talented. And as we've been working together, we just have bonded so much. And I love that. I know in your professional life, what you do is break down people's brand identities and their companies and what their backgrounds are. And ironically, when we were talking about communication, it's interesting because you and I have something in common, and we're both biracial and had a lot of conversations about cross-culture communication, especially being biracial. So tell our audience a little bit about your background.
Okay. So as you mentioned, I'm a social media and marketing consultant, and I help people with their branding. And like you mentioned, like helping people break down their brand identity, who they are as a person, and how that's reflected through their brand and what they want to say to their audience, how to be like more, I guess, how to communicate better with people digitally. We're in a digital world, and a lot of people don't really know how to transition like into that space. So on the marketing and business side, that's kind of what I do. Personally, I am half Mexican. My mom's Mexican American, and my dad is Black. So I am biracial.
How was that growing up? I know you and I have a little bit of years between each other. My mother is Korean, my father's African American, and we've talked about our different experiences. And I was shocked because I grew up probably in the 80s, early 90s, and you grew up more in the later 90s. And some of the intolerance that you experienced. Yeah, share a little bit of that. Did people still kind of treat you like you were a unicorn?
Yeah, I was younger for sure. Now, not so much. And I live in Florida, so it's like a lot more diverse here. But I grew up in Chicago, and like the area that we lived in wasn't super diverse. It was pretty white. So I got made fun of a lot because I have like, well, it's like not frizzy right now, but before it was like fluffy and like afro hair, but I'm light. So it was like, I'm not really white, but I'm not really Black. And I just felt like, I don't know, nobody ever looked like me. I didn't look like anybody else, and kids would always make fun of me, but I didn't really get why. We were raised just very American. Like, I wouldn't say that it was really one culture or the other. Like, I don't really speak Spanish. I do more so now, but that's just because I chose to learn. But like, my mom didn't really speak Spanish to us. And we didn't live near family, so we weren't really like around a lot of Black people. We weren't really around a lot of Mexican people. It was just my parents. So, and they're just like normal American people. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't feel like people thought I was like weird, just different maybe.
Yeah, just like they're not used to seeing biracial or a lot of times you grow up in environments or cloistered communities where people look like you. So when someone looks like a blend, they always give you a second look. Like, I know I get that even now. Yeah. People are always like, "Oh, are you this? Are you that?" Yeah. I'm just human. That's all. Nothing special.
Right. Exactly.
But with that being said, when you get into these different cultures, right? Especially in the African American community versus the Hispanic community, have you felt almost that you had to choose a side sometimes, or you had to prove your, like, okay, I'm Black enough, or I'm Hispanic enough, like I matter? Like, how have you handled situations like that?
It was a lot harder when I was younger, I think, because I felt really insecure about it. Like I mentioned, I never felt like when I was around Black people, because I'm light, so I never felt like I don't look like them, so I'm not Black enough. And when I was around Hispanic people, I don't speak Spanish, so I'm not Hispanic enough. And when I'm with white people, I'm like, I don't look like them, so I'm not white enough. I'm just like kind of, I don't know, I'm just me, and that's how I see it now. But before, I just felt like I don't know, maybe I didn't fit in or something. Like I never felt like I could blend. I'm kind of like a low under the radar type of person. So it was hard to do that. And people love to point out like how different you are and how like not like everybody else in the room you are. So
like that Sesame Street. I don't even know if you watched Sesame Street growing up, but there was a thing called one of these kids is doing their own thing, and it was just whoever stands out. I totally can relate to that because even with me growing up, people were always like, "Are you?" And I felt insecure about it too. I'm like, "Oh," they were like, "Oh, you got chinky eyes or this," and I used to think if my eyes didn't look like this, they wouldn't know if I'm, you know. And it does build an insecurity. We already have some great questions in our chat. Derek Lott says, do you think being biracial gave you any advantages?
That's a good question.
We got our biracial cards. We don't tell everybody about magic cards.
No, that's something people always say. They're like, you can play both sides of the fence. Like you can get whatever scholarship you want. And believe it or not, I did not get any scholarships for being biracial. So I don't know. I'll have to think on that one. I don't know. What about you? Do you feel like you've?
I think that when it comes to corporate America, I hate to say it, but we could be a little bit more safe. And I know you and I had a conversation about that too, where sometimes you even have to make people aware, like, hey, hello, or I am African American, or I am half Asian too. If people are saying different things about one of the cultures that you are a part of, I think it's a great position to create more awareness for people. And that's what we're talking about, communicating. Right. When you're multicultural, you have to consider all parts. And the advantage is when you're in these spaces, you can truly be the representation and be the change and speak up. And as people get to know you, and I think it helped me get thicker skin. I don't know if you did. I know you mentioned when you were younger. I just got to the point now, it doesn't even bother me when people say stuff or make fun of me or don't know. I'm just like,
oh. At this point, so it's like, good one. Never heard that before.
Exactly. So that too. Now, as far as communicating, and as you did grow up and become more confident in your skin, how did you have to change how you communicated with your mother's family versus your father's family? Did you feel like one side made you feel, oh, okay, I don't know, if you're Hispanic more, if you're with more of the Hispanic crowd, did they make you feel kind of like you did not know how to communicate with them? Do they say stuff to you in Spanish where you're like, okay, what are y'all saying? Because I know that happened to me with my mom. And even now, my mom will have conversations straight up in Korean. I'm like, I don't know what y'all talking about. Right. But did you feel like that and feel like it was insensitive at times?
Not so much, but I will say I didn't grow up near my extended family. So I don't really know them that well, to be honest. So my mom's side of the family, we would go visit them probably more often as kids, but now I'm a lot closer with my dad's side because they live here. So, I mean, we're friends, we get along. People think that we're friends when we're hanging out. People don't believe we're cousins because they're darker than me. And then vice versa, people see my other cousins who are like blonde hair, blue eyes, and they're confused about that too. So from a communication standpoint, funny enough, actually, political differences has become a thing the older I've gotten. And I just choose not to discuss it, but it definitely bothers me. Like the older I get and the more that kind of stuff becomes more important.
Yeah, it's more relevant.
And more especially like with our climate, it has started to kind of like be more of a wedge, I would say, be more noticeable. But yeah, I mean, we haven't really, that's not something that we usually choose to discuss.
No, I understand. And we have another great question from, I'm sure it's Nadia and Shaka Nickerson. Being biracial, do you feel any insecurities when you are with Black people or family or white people, or do you feel more confident? I guess we kind of touched on that. Now where you are as a grown woman, an entrepreneur, and you have a lot of experience, do you still have those insecurities? And if you do, what have you done to overcome them?
That's a good question. As of now, I feel like I have been able to overcome those insecurities. I wouldn't say that there's any side that I felt more or less insecure. It was just different. you know. I felt different around everybody, and that made me feel like, I don't know, like I was a sore thumb or something. But how did I overcome it? I think just accepting myself.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That there's nothing wrong with like being mixed isn't bad.
Agreed.
That my parents didn't make a bad decision. They made an awesome decision to love each other regardless what their family thought. So just like accepting that, I think was like, I don't know, it was kind of like an awakening for me.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. Kayla Rodriguez, and her husband, I believe, is Hispanic. So she made a great point. She said, I always say that people disarm around my husband because he's not just Black. It's almost like an advantage to not be Black, so he's not too Black. I agree with her. I think that people do. It's sad to say, but it is. And it comes all about the communication part, because we don't know what we don't know. And I think people sometimes don't feel comfortable to have those conversations, and then that makes them feel more divisive and not asking. So, which leads us to kind of some tips. What are some tips that you have that's helped you to communicate better across cultures?
Do we want to do our little?
Oh yeah, I know you were telling me like putting without LOVE, and you have this really cool acronym. I love acronyms.
Yes, I do as well.
What would you say are some of the tips that people can do to better communicate across cultures?
So the first one would be L is to listen. To listen to what people are saying, listen to the people around you. Your experience is not everybody else's experience, and vice versa. So you want to hear people out, and like what they're like, just to hear their experience is like the first step. You know what I mean? Whether you agree with it or not, or you can like relate to it or not, that's their truth. So listening. And then the second one is to be open-minded. Again, what I go through is different from what somebody else goes through, and everybody's experience will shape the way that they think, the way they feel, the way they act, how they perceive everything, politics, romance, the workplace, everything.
Coronavirus, how people,
yes, whether or not it exists.
Or whether there's some people who may be just extremely fearful of it, and other people who are so lackadaisical. Either way, you want to be open-minded to people's perspectives and then kind of figure out. So I love that. I love that. And then for the V, you were saying to
value all cultural perspectives. So again, everybody has a different, whatever their background is going to shape their reality, right? So growing up in one culture is going to be very different from growing up in another. Like one that I get a lot, or that I guess I noticed right away, is like, I didn't realize that a lot of white people don't spank their kids, and Hispanics and Blacks do. So when somebody might call that a beat down or abuse or something like that. And it's not that anybody's right or wrong. It's just like your perspective. Yeah.
It's funny because I had oh my gosh, it's funny you said that, because one of my bosses, and he was amazing, but he's a very firm man from New York, just no nonsense. And I remember him and I having a conversation, and he has 3 children that are very successful. And I was like, do you spank your kids? And he was like, he never spanked his children. He does not believe in that. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, right? So I was like, oh no, I do spank my child. And, we do it within reason, and we try not to do it when we're angry. But I was like, that's not how we do it. Like, we grew up, you got to look, and you already knew. And if you rolled your eyes or sucked your teeth, it was just not appropriate. And every culture is different. So you're right. You have to value all cultural perspectives, and how just because people don't discipline their children the same way or whatnot. That's so interesting. You said that.
That's the one that always comes to mind immediately, just because.
Oh, here we go. A little testimony. Yeah, spare the rod.
Yes.
And then the final. And the next one is like my favorite word. I swear I should just get it tattooed on my arm. But the E you said is for
empathy.
Yes.
We are not all the same. Everybody's different, and to empathize with everyone's culture, even my own parents. Like, because I know we were talking about how sometimes when you're going through those moments of insecurity, you kind of think to your parents, like, why did you do this to me? If I was a little darker, I'd be black. If I was my hair was straighter, I would be Mexican. But even to empathize with them, like they love each other. So why not be together, you know?
Yes. And then too, understanding why, really, if you try to see the world through someone else's eyes and hear the world through someone else's ears and then feel the world through someone else's heart, it's like my favorite quote about empathy, that does help you cross-cultural communicate, right? When you really do that. And it's hard because we're loaded with our own expectations and feelings. And I think at times people just forget, like, hey, it's not about you. Try to listen to what they're saying. Try to look at it from their perspective.
Right.
Absolutely. We have some great comments in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Kalila, one of my besties, she just asked a great question. When you have children, what traditions do you want them to pass on to your children from both sides of your family? That's a great question for you.
Oh, that is a good question.
Like, do you have traditions that were more from your Black side of the family versus your Hispanic side, or did your parents kind of merge things for you all? I know we talked about, you told me that, and I hope you don't kill me, but you brought up the whole example about Lawry's seasoning salt and how Black friends were like, how do you not know what Lawry's is? And you're like, my mama don't cook with Lawry's because she is.
Yeah, exactly. Things like that where it's like, I don't know, like the stereotypical Black or stereotypical Hispanic things. I don't know, like it just depended who was in charge of that tradition in our household. So my mom was a cook. So to answer that question, that's something I'd want to pass down. It's like
Hispanic cooking and
heck yeah.
That I do love that. And then do you like, even I know like if you got married and stuff, would you do stuff like jump the broom, or are there different Hispanic that they love to do at weddings? Or did you have a quinceañera? Is it what it's called?
No, I didn't. And from the wedding standpoint, I don't love those traditions. So probably just like I said before, we were very just like regular baseline American in my household. So whatever like the traditions are, it wasn't explained to me like we're doing this because we are Black or we're doing this because we are Mexican. It's just like, this is what we did. I will say so my parents had a mariachi band at their wedding, and that's not
that's like traditional Mexican music, and it's like
that's
not
something I would probably want to pass down. Some songs that we do, I would. I don't know. I'd have to think probably.
That was a great question, though. But you think about it too, because you don't want your children. You want to try to blend things, and I do think, and I have the conversation that now in 2020, multiculturalism is a lot more accepted. It's everything. I mean, applications now, you have choices where you can choose multiracial, or you can they choose more than one race. Where I know for me, when I grew up, and I know you growing up too, it was either Black, white, Hispanic. That was it. And they didn't even have other when I was growing up. Now, then they started having other, probably like your generation. And now they're being more sensitive about all the different races, as well as gender and sexuality differences, which I think it says a lot just as a whole world, how we are expanding our scope and being more inclusive and being more empathetic to others. Because if something is not right for you and your family, it doesn't mean that that's not the case for everyone else. And we should truly suspend judgment in how people conduct their lives or their culturalism and things like that too.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one thing that I will say kind of to that question about the traditions, I feel like my parents, they raised us just to be like good-hearted people. It wasn't really like, they didn't really want our race to be part of our, like, at the forefront of our identity. You know what I mean? Which
almost like life is colorblind,
and I will say I don't necessarily agree with that either, because it was kind of like this huge shock when people would like comment on my race and how like my looks like corresponded to my race and things like that. So I just didn't know. I had no idea that those things were related. But
that's powerful. And two, now with a lot of the hot topics that are in the media that are not new. I mean, racial profiling and racism have been around since the beginning of time, but it's becoming a lot more aware. I think that your generation is becoming even a lot more aware of it because a lot of your generation probably has grown up in more suburban areas where it wasn't so divisive, but then you get into mainstream world, like you said, and you see that. So I love you said trying to teach your children to be colorblind is not necessarily the way to go. Like there's no issues. Yes, you want them to be tolerant and love and be culturally competent, but understand, hey, we are this race, this culture. It's okay to have pride with that. And I feel like that all ways. I had a conversation with a mentor of mine who is an executive for a bank that I worked for, and she's a white woman, and she felt comfortable enough to ask me about things going on. And she was like, one thing she felt really bad about is she didn't know how to navigate this space because she's like, I'm a white woman. I don't want people to think I'm insensitive. And some of the stuff I just don't have any idea of. I don't understand. I haven't had to deal with that, but I want to be more empathetic. She's like, but I don't feel comfortable asking anyone. And no one is like volunteering. She's like, I think everyone's mad at white people. And I love your acronym because communicating is all about the love, and that's what I try to tell her. She was like, thank you so much for allowing me to ask you these questions. Now, with you and your clients, do you have things where race and culture topics have to come up sometimes, or even with generational differences? Have you had any challenges like that?
With my clients now, no. I've been really blessed to have like a pretty diverse array of clients. And a lot of them are Black owned, so I'm like really happy to be able to working with them. I will say one of my more corporate type of clients was like, hey, just want to let you know our company doesn't believe in commenting on any political issues during this time. So that was just one of those things you just have to accept, even though it's not a race issue or it's not a political issue. Race is a human issue, but that's neither here nor there. But I will say I've been pretty lucky for the most part. I think more in the corporate setting is when it can get a little hairy.
Been there, done that.
Well, that's why we are entrepreneurs now.
But I will say with the new climate, I know Nadia's on here and she works for a corporate company that has done a lot of great things to show more cultural competency and inclusion. And I think a lot of companies are, like we've seen all over the news, all over TV, and it is a step. And then there are some people who feel like, hey, it's not enough, or they're just doing this because of this. I'm like, you know what? Whatever caused it doesn't matter, but it's here now. And let's continue to have this dialogue. Let's continue to keep communication amongst cultures, right?
Right. Exactly.
I would say that too. Now, with you being a millennial generation, do you feel like it's harder for people from generations prior to your generation to kind of be more open-minded? Have you had a lot more resistance from that, or do you feel like it's more the younger generation who's clueless, or everyone's just clueless?
In my personal experience, the older generations have been, what is the word? I don't know. It comes from more of like a race. I don't know.
They have racial. Yeah.
With my generation and like younger, it's more of just like an ignorance thing, I think. If they don't understand that, I don't know. Like I don't identify as one or the other. I'm both. I'm always both all the time, So I think sometimes they can say some, they're trying to be funny, but it's a little bit ignorant or whatever, making like Hispanic jokes, or when I'm with non-Black people making Black jokes, just ignorant things. It's not really coming from a place of hate, but it doesn't make it any less like.
At those moments, do you take that time to kind of teach people a little bit more cultural sensitivity and expand their dimensions? Be like, hey,
absolutely.
This could be offensive to somebody, maybe they didn't know.
Yeah. And I think when I was younger, I didn't think of it this way, but actually Kayla was the one who was like, well, maybe you should look at it as like an opportunity for you to teach people because you're like the bridge. I don't know. I always wonder like if other mixed people think that way, but I think that's a really positive way to look at it, be that like bridge between the cultures.
I agree. And like you said, it's all about the love. For those of you just joining us, I loved your acronym. Olivia told us that we should listen, be open-minded, value all cultural perspectives, and have empathy, which stands for love. I thought that was great. Well, Olivia, I am so overjoyed that we got a chance to talk. I absolutely have so much respect for you. You have a great work ethic. You're so talented. And I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you sharing some of your experience about cultural communication and how we can be more effective. Did you have any closing comments before we end our session?
No, thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate it. I guess like the last thing that I would want to leave is, I know we talked about the love, but just to, I guess like to put yourself in other people's shoes, you know what I mean? Like just to think about like how, especially now, right? Like now that, not that these topics have ever been more or less, but just thinking about, you know, how your words affect people, right? And spread the love, like we said.
And your words or lack of words. If there's an opportunity where you can help to cross culture, communicate, take advantage of it, you know, do it. Don't wait until something's a hot button, or don't be scared to say something. I know, Nadia is on the call, one of my good friends. I had her on a few weeks ago, and she's really good about that. She has a pretty diverse coworkers and friends, and they're constantly having great, uncomfortable conversations, but that's how we all learn. So I love that. And here she is saying that. Oh, I love it. And love is a great way to embrace diversity. So this has been so much fun. Thank you so much, Olivia. And thank you all for joining us. Please, if you would like to connect with Olivia, she is on all social media outlets. I have her IG. You can reach her on I Live Life, and her website. Oh, did I say it right? Is it I Live Life?
Mm-hmm. I Live _life. Yep.
And then also on ohmediaconsulting.com. Thank you again. Have an amazing day. Let's continue to grow together, everyone, and have a great week.